The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Windsor Castle as 8-year-old Princess Charlotte walked alongside her governess, Miss Sarah. The young princess had always been curious about the people who worked tirelessly to protect her family, especially the stoic guards who stood motionless for hours at their posts. Charlotte had noticed something different about one particular guard over the past few weeks. Guard Thomas Mitchell, a 28-year-old former soldier, had been assigned to the morning shift at the castle's main entrance. What caught Charlotte's attention wasn't his perfect posture or his unwavering dedication to duty, but the subtle signs of struggle she had begun to recognize. During her daily walks through the castle grounds, Charlotte had developed a habit of observing people. Her mother, the Princess of Wales, had always taught her children to be aware of others and to show kindness whenever possible. This lesson had stuck with Charlotte more than anyone realized. Guard Mitchell had been standing at his post for nearly 3 hours when Charlotte first noticed the slight tremor in his hands. Most people would have missed it entirely, but Charlotte had sharp eyes for details. She watched as he occasionally shifted his weight from one foot to the other, a movement so subtle that it would be invisible to casual observers. What Charlotte didn't know was that Thomas Mitchell was fighting a private battle. He had recently returned from a difficult deployment overseas, and the transition back to civilian life had been challenging. The rigid structure of his guard duties helped him cope, but some days were harder than others. His family was struggling financially, and he had been working extra shifts to make ends meet. The young princess had also noticed that Guard Mitchell never seemed to eat during his breaks. While other guards would sit together sharing sandwiches and stories, Thomas would simply stand in a quiet corner, checking his phone with a worried expression. Charlotte's kind heart began to feel concerned for this dedicated man who worked so hard to keep her family safe. One particularly cold morning, Charlotte observed Guard Mitchell's lips turning slightly blue as he maintained his position, despite the bitter wind. She watched as he fought to control his shivering, never once abandoning his professional stance. Other guards had been rotated due to the harsh weather, but Thomas remained steadfast at his post. Miss Sarah, who had been Charlotte's governess for 2 years, noticed the princess's growing interest in the guard's well-being. She had always admired Charlotte's compassionate nature, which reminded her so much of the late Queen Elizabeth's empathy for those who served the royal family. During their afternoon lessons, Charlotte found herself distracted, thinking about Guard Mitchell. She asked Miss Sarah questions about the guards' working conditions, their families, and whether they ever felt cold or hungry during their long shifts. Her governess answered as best she could, impressed by Charlotte's genuine concern for others. That evening, Charlotte approached her mother with carefully chosen words. She didn't want to get Guard Mitchell in trouble, but she felt compelled to help somehow. The Princess of Wales listened thoughtfully as her daughter described her observations, proud of Charlotte's empathy but also mindful of the protocol and boundaries that governed royal interactions with staff. Charlotte's mother explained that while their family greatly appreciated all the guards' service, there were proper channels for addressing any concerns about working conditions. However, she also encouraged Charlotte's instinct to show kindness, suggesting that sometimes small gestures could mean more than grand ones. The next morning, Charlotte noticed Guard Mitchell looked particularly tired. His usually perfect uniform seemed slightly wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Unknown to Charlotte, Thomas had spent most of the night at the hospital with his sick daughter, catching only 2 hours of sleep before reporting for duty. As Charlotte walked past the guard post with Miss Sarah, she made a decision that would soon change everything. She had been thinking about her conversation with her mother, and had come up with what she believed was a perfect solution. It was simple, kind, and something she could do without breaking any rules or causing any problems. The plan that formed in Charlotte's mind was inspired by a story her grandfather, King Charles, had once told her about small acts of kindness creating ripples of goodness that spread far beyond their original intention. She remembered how he had emphasized that true leadership came from caring for those who served others. Guard Mitchell, for his part, had no idea that his professional demeanor hadn't completely hidden his personal struggles. He took pride in his work and was determined never to let his private difficulties affect his duties. The last thing he wanted was to draw attention to himself or create any concerns about his ability to protect the royal family. As the morning progressed, Charlotte's resolve strengthened. She had noticed that Guard Mitchell's water bottle was empty, and she had seen him discreetly check his watch several times, clearly calculating how much longer he needed to remain at his post. The temperature was dropping and storm clouds were gathering overhead. Miss Sarah, who had grown accustomed to Charlotte's thoughtful nature, sensed that her young charge was planning something. She had learned to recognize the determined look in Charlotte's eyes, the same expression the princess wore when she was working through a problem or preparing to help someone. The stage was set for an encounter that would demonstrate the true character of both a young princess and a dedicated guard. Neither Charlotte nor Thomas Mitchell could have anticipated how a simple moment of human kindness would soon capture the attention of everyone at the castle and eventually touch hearts around the world. As the morning drew toward its end, Charlotte made her final preparations for what she hoped would be a gesture that honored both her family's values and her own growing understanding of what it meant to truly care for others. The secret she was about to share with Guard Mitchell would prove that sometimes the smallest actions carry the greatest power to inspire and unite people across all boundaries. Charlotte spent the next hour carefully executing her plan. She had asked Miss Sarah if they could visit the castle's kitchen, claiming she wanted to learn more about how meals were prepared for such a large household. Her governess, always supportive of Charlotte's educational curiosity, readily agreed to the request. In the warm, bustling kitchen, Charlotte greeted the staff with her usual polite enthusiasm. The head cook, Mrs. Eleanor Davies, had known Charlotte since she was a toddler and always enjoyed the princess's visits. The kitchen staff appreciated how Charlotte never acted superior despite her royal status, instead showing genuine interest in their work and treating everyone with respect. Charlotte carefully observed how the kitchen operated, noting where supplies were kept and how meals were packaged for different members of the household staff. She watched as sandwiches were prepared for the guards' lunch rotation and saw how thermoses of hot tea were filled for those working outdoor posts during cold weather. When Mrs. Davies offered Charlotte a warm scone fresh from the oven, the princess accepted gratefully but asked if she could have a second one to take with her. She also requested a thermos of hot chocolate, claiming she wanted to warm up after her cold morning walk. Mrs. Davies, always happy to spoil the young princess, quickly prepared both items. Charlotte then asked what seemed like an innocent question about whether the guards ever got cold during their long shifts. Mrs. Davies explained that the kitchen staff were always mindful of the guards' needs, especially during harsh weather, and that they tried to ensure everyone had access to warm drinks and proper meals. As they prepared to leave the kitchen, Charlotte made one more request. She asked if she could have a small package of biscuits, the kind she had seen her grandfather King Charles particularly enjoy. Mrs. Davies, delighted by Charlotte's thoughtfulness toward her grandfather, wrapped up a generous portion of the finest biscuits available. Miss Sarah watched Charlotte's careful preparations with growing curiosity, but didn't question her charge's motives. She had learned that Charlotte often had well-intentioned plans that revealed themselves in due time. The governess trusted the princess's good judgment and kind heart. Meanwhile, Guard Mitchell continued his duty at the main entrance, unaware of the attention he had garnered from the young princess. The storm clouds had grown darker, and a light drizzle had begun to fall. Despite the increasingly uncomfortable conditions, Thomas maintained his professional stance. Though the cold was beginning to affect his concentration, Thomas had been thinking about his daughter Emma, who had been fighting a persistent fever for several days. The medical bills were mounting, and his wife Sarah had been forced to take time off work to care for their sick child. The financial pressure was weighing heavily on his mind, but he pushed these worries aside to focus on his responsibilities. Charlotte and Miss Sarah made their way back through the castle corridors, the princess carrying her carefully gathered items in a small basket that Mrs. Davies had provided. Charlotte's heart was beating faster with anticipation and nervousness about what she was planning to do. As they approached the main entrance, Charlotte could see Guard Mitchell standing steadfastly at his post despite the worsening weather. The sight of his dedication despite the obvious discomfort strengthened her resolve to carry out her gesture of kindness. Miss Sarah finally asked Charlotte about her intentions, having noticed the purposeful way the princess had gathered the food and drinks. Charlotte explained her plan simply and honestly, telling her governess that she had noticed Guard Mitchell seemed cold and tired, and she wanted to do something kind for someone who worked so hard to protect her family. The governess was touched by Charlotte's compassion, but gently reminded her about the protocols surrounding interactions with guards. She explained that while Charlotte's intentions were beautiful, they needed to be careful about how they approached the situation to ensure both respect for the guard's position and adherence to security procedures. Charlotte listened carefully to Miss Sarah's guidance and suggested a modified approach that would still allow her to show kindness while respecting everyone's roles and responsibilities. Her solution demonstrated wisdom beyond her years and showed how much she had learned from her parents about balancing royal duties with human compassion. Together, they developed a plan that would allow Charlotte to express her gratitude and care for Guard Mitchell in a way that honored both his service and the dignity of his position. Miss Sarah was impressed by Charlotte's maturity and her ability to find solutions that considered everyone's feelings and circumstances. As they made their final approach toward Guard Mitchell's post, Charlotte felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She hoped her gesture would be received in the spirit it was intended, and that she wasn't overstepping any boundaries. Most importantly, she wanted Guard Mitchell to know that his service was noticed and appreciated. The rain had intensified slightly, and Charlotte could see that Guard Mitchell was now visibly struggling with the cold and wet conditions. His dedication to duty, despite the discomfort, only reinforced her belief that he deserved recognition and kindness. Miss Sarah gave Charlotte an encouraging nod, signaling that she approved of the princess's plan and would support her in carrying it out. The governess had seen many acts of kindness during her time with the royal family, but Charlotte's simple, heartfelt gesture reminded her of why she felt so honored to work with such a compassionate family. Charlotte took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to make her gesture of kindness that would soon demonstrate the true spirit of royal service and human connection. The interaction that was about to unfold would reveal character, grace, and the power of simple human kindness to bridge any gap between people, regardless of their roles or stations in life. Charlotte approached Guard Mitchell with careful, respectful steps. She had practiced what she wanted to say during her walk through the castle corridors, but now that the moment had arrived, her heart was beating so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Miss Sarah walked slightly behind her, ready to provide support if needed. Guard Mitchell noticed the approaching princess from the corner of his eye, but maintained his forward-facing position as protocol required. He had seen her walk past his post many times before, usually accompanied by her governess or other family members, but this felt different. There was something deliberate about her approach that made him slightly nervous. When Charlotte reached a respectful distance from the guard post, she stopped and cleared her throat softly. Guard Mitchell, following proper procedure, turned his attention to the princess while maintaining his professional posture. His training had prepared him for various scenarios, but nothing had quite prepared him for what was about to happen. Charlotte looked up at the tall guard with her bright, sincere eyes and spoke in her clear, polite voice. She told Guard Mitchell that she had noticed how dedicated he was to his duties, especially during the cold and rainy weather. She mentioned that she had seen him standing at his post for hours without complaint, and she wanted him to know that his service was appreciated. Thomas Mitchell was stunned by the princess's words. In his years of service, he had received official commendations and recognition from superior officers, but never had someone so young shown such awareness of his efforts. He struggled to find the appropriate response, his professional training battling with his genuine surprise and gratitude. Charlotte then did something that surprised everyone present. She reached into her basket and pulled out the thermos of hot chocolate that Mrs. Davies had prepared. She explained to Guard Mitchell that she had noticed he looked cold, and she wanted to share something warm with him. She emphasized that this wasn't charity or pity, but simply one person caring for another. The guard's eyes widened in astonishment. He had never experienced such a direct act of kindness from a member of the royal family, and he wasn't sure how to respond according to protocol. His training told him to politely decline, but his heart was touched by the genuine concern. In the young princess's voice, Miss Sarah stepped forward gently and explained to Guard Mitchell that Princess Charlotte had specifically requested to do something kind for the guards who worked so hard to protect her family. She assured him that this gesture came from Charlotte's own initiative and was meant to honor his service, not to suggest any shortcoming in the arrangements for the guards' welfare. Charlotte then produced the package of biscuits and the extra scone she had obtained from the kitchen. She told Guard Mitchell that she had learned these were some of the best treats the castle kitchen had to offer, and she wanted to share them with someone who deserved something special. Her words were simple but filled with such genuine warmth that they touched everyone present. Guard Mitchell found himself in an unprecedented situation. His throat felt tight with emotion as he looked down at this young princess who had taken time from her day to notice his dedication and respond with such thoughtful kindness. He realized that Charlotte's gesture represented something far more significant than the food and drink she was offering. The rain continued to fall around them, but neither Charlotte nor Guard Mitchell seemed to notice anymore. In that moment, the formal barriers between royal family member and staff member seemed to dissolve, replaced by simple human connection and mutual respect. Miss Sarah watched with tears forming in her eyes, recognizing the profound beauty of the scene unfolding before her. Charlotte explained to Guard Mitchell that she had been thinking about how hard everyone worked to keep her family safe, and she realized she had never properly thanked the individual guards for their service. She told him that seeing his dedication, especially in difficult weather, had inspired her to find a way to show her appreciation. Thomas Mitchell, despite his military training and professional composure, felt his own eyes beginning to water. He thought about his daughter Emma, sick at home, and his wife Sarah, worried about their mounting bills. This unexpected kindness from Princess Charlotte seemed to lift a weight from his shoulders that he hadn't even realized he was carrying. The guard carefully accepted the thermos and food that Charlotte offered, his hands trembling slightly as he took them. He managed to find his voice and thank the princess with words that came straight from his heart. He told her that her kindness meant more to him than she could possibly know, and that he would never forget this moment. Charlotte smiled with the pure joy of a child who had successfully carried out a plan to help someone else. She told Guard Mitchell that she hoped the hot chocolate would help keep him warm, and that she would always remember how dedicated he was to protecting her family. She added that she hoped his day would get better, and that he would stay safe and warm. Miss Sarah was deeply moved by the exchange she had witnessed. She had seen many formal ceremonies and official recognitions during her time with the royal family, but this simple, spontaneous act of kindness from 8-year-old Charlotte seemed more powerful than any grand gesture she had ever observed. The interaction had lasted only a few minutes, but its impact was already spreading beyond the 3 people directly involved. Other staff members who had witnessed the scene from windows and doorways were talking quietly among themselves, amazed by what they had seen. Word was beginning to spread throughout the castle about Princess Charlotte's extraordinary gesture of kindness. As Charlotte prepared to continue with her day, she had no idea that her simple act of compassion was about to create ripples that would extend far beyond the castle walls. The secret gesture she had shared with Guard Mitchell was about to become something much larger, touching hearts and inspiring others in ways she never could have imagined. As Charlotte and Miss Sarah walked away from Guard Mitchell's post, they could hear other staff members whispering excitedly about what they had just witnessed. The princess remained unaware of the growing attention her gesture was receiving, focused instead on the warm feeling of satisfaction that came from helping someone else. Guard Mitchell stood at his post holding the thermos of hot chocolate, still processing what had just occurred. The warmth from the drink spread through his hands and up his arms, but the warmth in his heart from Charlotte's kindness was even more powerful. For the first time in weeks, he felt genuinely hopeful about his circumstances. Word of the encounter spread quickly through the castle's staff network. Kitchen workers who had helped prepare Charlotte's surprise began sharing the story with housekeeping staff, who told maintenance crews, who mentioned it to security personnel. Each telling of the story added new details about the princess's thoughtfulness and the guard's emotional response. Mrs. Davies, the head cook, felt particularly proud when she learned how her hot chocolate and biscuits had been used in Charlotte's gesture of kindness. She began telling other kitchen staff about how carefully the princess had planned her approach, asking thoughtful questions about the guard's needs and selecting items specifically to bring comfort on a cold, rainy day. Meanwhile, Charlotte continued with her scheduled activities, attending her afternoon lessons with Miss Sarah. However, her governess noticed that the princess seemed more focused and engaged than usual. The act of kindness appeared to have energized Charlotte, giving her a sense of purpose and connection that enhanced everything else she did that day. During their geography lesson, Charlotte asked questions about different climates and weather conditions, wondering aloud how people in various parts of the world stayed warm and comfortable in harsh conditions. Miss Sarah recognized that Charlotte's morning gesture had sparked a broader curiosity about human welfare and the challenges people face in different circumstances. Back at his post, Guard Mitchell found that the hot chocolate not only warmed his body, but seemed to give him renewed strength and focus. His fellow guards began to notice a change in his demeanor. He stood straighter, seemed more alert, and had what could only be described as a glow of contentment about him. When the shift supervisor, Sergeant Williams, made his routine rounds, he immediately noticed the positive change in Guard Mitchell's bearing. Thomas explained what had happened with Princess Charlotte, and the sergeant was moved by both the princess's gesture and Mitchell's professional handling of the unexpected situation. Sergeant Williams realized that this incident represented something special that should be properly recognized and documented. He made notes about Charlotte's initiative and Guard Mitchell's exemplary response, planning to include both in his official report to the head of security. As the afternoon progressed, more members of the castle staff found reasons to walk past Guard Mitchell's post. They wanted to see for themselves the guard who had been honored by Princess Charlotte's personal attention. Some offered quiet words of congratulations, while others simply nodded respectfully as they passed. Charlotte's parents, the Prince and Princess of Wales, learned about their daughter's gesture when Miss Sarah provided her daily report about the princess's activities. Both parents felt immense pride in Charlotte's initiative and the thoughtful way she had carried out her plan to help Guard Mitchell. The Princess of Wales was particularly moved by the story, remembering her own experiences of trying to balance royal protocol with genuine human connection. She recognized in Charlotte's actions the same instincts that had guided her own approach to royal duties, the belief that true service meant caring for others, regardless of their position or circumstances. Prince William was equally impressed by his daughter's compassion and maturity. He made a mental note to discuss the incident with Charlotte later, not to criticize but to praise her instincts and perhaps guide her thinking about how such gestures could be part of her future role as a member of the royal family. News of Charlotte's kindness began to reach other departments within the royal household. The private secretary's office heard about it from the head of security, who had received Sergeant Williams's preliminary report. Senior staff members found themselves smiling as they shared the story, reminded of why they felt honored to serve a family that clearly valued kindness and human connection. Guard Mitchell's wife, Sarah, received an unexpected phone call from her husband during his break. Thomas had never called during work hours before, but he felt compelled to share Charlotte's gesture with someone who would understand its significance. Sarah cried tears of joy as she listened to her husband describe the princess's kindness, feeling grateful that good things were finally happening for their family. The story of Charlotte's secret gesture was beginning to take on a life of its own within the castle community. Staff members who had never spoken to each other before found themselves bonding over their shared admiration for the young princess's compassion and the guard's dignified response to her kindness. As evening approached, Charlotte sat down for dinner with her family, unaware that her morning gesture had become the most talked-about event in the castle that day. She mentioned to her parents that she had given a thermos of hot chocolate to one of the guards who looked cold, describing it as simply something nice she wanted to do. Her parents exchanged knowing glances, having already heard the full story from Miss Sarah. They praised Charlotte for her thoughtfulness while also using the moment to discuss the importance of treating everyone with kindness and respect, regardless of their role or position in life. Charlotte felt happy knowing that she had brightened Guard Mitchell's day, but she had no idea that her simple act of kindness was about to spread far beyond the castle walls. The secret she had shared with one dedicated guard was becoming a symbol of hope and human connection that would soon touch many more lives than she ever could have imagined. The next morning brought unexpected developments that would transform Charlotte's private gesture into something much more significant. Guard Mitchell arrived for his shift with a renewed sense of purpose, carrying with him not just the memory of Charlotte's kindness, but also a thermos that his wife Sarah had insisted he bring, filled with homemade soup as a way of honoring the spirit of generosity the princess had shown. Sergeant Williams had spent the evening writing his official report about the incident, carefully documenting both Princess Charlotte's initiative and Guard Mitchell's professional response. He had decided that this event deserved special recognition and had scheduled a meeting with the head of castle security to discuss how to properly acknowledge what had occurred. Meanwhile, Mrs. Davies in the kitchen had been thinking about Charlotte's visit and her thoughtful questions about the guard's welfare. Inspired by the princess's example, she had prepared a special batch of warm pastries and hot tea to distribute to all the guards during their morning break, wanting to extend Charlotte's spirit of caring to the entire security team. Charlotte began her day with her usual lessons, but Miss Sarah noticed that the princess seemed particularly interested in learning about leadership and service. During their history lesson, Charlotte asked thoughtful questions about how great leaders throughout history had shown care for the people who served them, demonstrating that her gesture with Guard Mitchell had sparked deeper thinking about responsibility and compassion. The head of castle security, Commander James Harrison, reviewed Sergeant Williams' report with great interest. He had served the royal family for over 20 years and had never encountered such a detailed account of spontaneous kindness between a family member and a guard. He realized that this incident represented something special that deserved careful consideration. Commander Harrison decided to share the report with the private secretary to the Prince and Princess of Wales, knowing that they would want to be aware of their daughter's actions and their positive impact on staff morale. He also began thinking about how to properly recognize Guard Mitchell's exemplary conduct during an unprecedented situation. Word of Charlotte's gesture continued to spread throughout the royal household staff. Housekeepers, gardeners, administrative assistants, and maintenance workers all found themselves discussing the young princess's thoughtfulness and what it meant to work for a family that valued such kindness. The story reached the attention of veteran staff members who had served the royal family for decades. Many of them shared their own memories of small acts of kindness they had witnessed over the years, creating a sense of continuity and tradition that connected Charlotte's gesture to a long history of royal compassion. Guard Mitchell's colleagues began treating him with a new level of respect, not because of his encounter with Princess Charlotte, but because of how gracefully he had handled the situation. His professional response, while clearly being moved by the princess's kindness, had earned him admiration from peers who understood how difficult it could be to maintain composure in unexpected circumstances. During the lunch break, several guards approached Thomas Mitchell to ask about his experience with Princess Charlotte. He described her genuine warmth and the careful way she had planned her gesture, emphasizing how natural and unforced her kindness had seemed. His colleagues were impressed by both Charlotte's maturity and Thomas's ability to appreciate her gesture while maintaining proper protocol. The story began to reach staff members, families as they returned home and shared their day's experiences. Guard Mitchell's wife Sarah told her neighbors about the princess's kindness, and soon the story was spreading through their community, bringing smiles and renewed faith in human goodness to people who had never set foot in the castle. Charlotte's teacher noted during their afternoon lesson that the princess seemed more engaged and thoughtful than usual. When they discussed current events and social issues, Charlotte asked insightful questions about how individuals could make a difference in other people's lives, showing that her experience with Guard Mitchell had influenced her thinking about civic responsibility and personal impact. The private secretary to the Prince and Princess of Wales received Commander Harrison's report and immediately understood its significance. This wasn't just a charming story about a kind child. It was evidence of Charlotte's developing character and her instinctive understanding of what royal service could mean in its most authentic form. A decision was made to arrange a brief, informal meeting between the Prince and Princess of Wales and Guard Mitchell, not to make a big production of Charlotte's gesture, but to personally thank him for his service and his graceful handling of their daughter's kindness. This meeting would acknowledge the dignity of both Charlotte's initiative and Thomas's professional response. As evening approached, Charlotte joined her family for dinner, still unaware of the broader impact her simple gesture was having throughout the castle and beyond. She mentioned to her parents that she had been thinking about ways to show appreciation for all the people who worked to keep their family safe and comfortable. Her parents listened with pride as Charlotte described her growing awareness of how many people contributed to their daily lives and her desire to find meaningful ways to express gratitude. They recognized that their daughter was developing exactly the kind of consciousness about service and responsibility that would serve her well in her future role. The Prince and Princess of Wales decided to use this opportunity to have a deeper conversation with Charlotte about the impact of kindness and the responsibility that came with her position. They wanted to encourage her instincts while also helping her understand how her actions could influence others and inspire positive change. Charlotte went to bed that night, feeling satisfied that she had done something good for Guard Mitchell, completely unaware that her secret gesture had become a source of inspiration for dozens of castle staff members and was beginning to create ripples of kindness that extended far beyond what she had ever imagined possible. The stage was set for even greater developments as word of Charlotte's gesture prepared to reach audiences far beyond the castle walls, carrying with it a message about the power of simple human kindness to bridge differences and create connections that transcend social boundaries. 3 days after Charlotte's gesture, the story took an unexpected turn when a member of the castle staff mentioned the incident to a family friend who worked as a journalist for a local newspaper. The journalist, recognizing the human interest value of the story, approached the royal press office to inquire about possibly writing a feature about acts of kindness within the royal household. The press office, after consulting with senior palace staff, recognized an opportunity to share a positive story that accurately reflected the royal family's values while respecting everyone's privacy. They decided to allow a carefully crafted article that would focus on the broader themes of service, gratitude, and human connection, rather than sensationalizing the specific incident. Charlotte's parents were consulted about the potential media attention and agreed that, if handled properly, the story could serve as a positive example of the values they were trying to instill in their children. They insisted that any coverage should respect Guard Mitchell's privacy and focus on the universal lessons about kindness rather than creating a spectacle. Meanwhile, Guard Mitchell was approached by Commander Harrison, who informed him about the potential media interest and asked for his consent to include his perspective in any coverage. Thomas, after discussing it with his wife Sarah, agreed to participate if it might inspire others to show kindness in their own communities. The journalist, Emma Thompson, spent 2 days interviewing various castle staff members who had witnessed or heard about Charlotte's gesture. She was struck by the consistent themes that emerged: admiration for the princess's maturity, respect for Guard Mitchell's professionalism, and a renewed sense of pride among staff members about working for a family that valued human connection. Mrs. Davies shared her perspective about Charlotte's careful planning and thoughtful questions in the kitchen, emphasizing how natural and unforced the princess's kindness had seemed. Miss Sarah, with permission from Charlotte's parents, described the educational value of the experience and how it had sparked deeper conversations about leadership and service. Sergeant Williams provided insight into the professional aspects of the situation, explaining how both Charlotte and Guard Mitchell had navigated an unprecedented scenario with grace and mutual respect. He emphasized that the incident had boosted morale throughout the security team and reinforced their commitment to protecting a family that clearly valued their service. The article, titled "A Princess's Simple Gesture Reminds Us All of the Power of Kindness," was published on a Friday morning and immediately captured public attention. Social media responses began pouring in within hours, with people sharing their own stories of unexpected kindness and discussing what Charlotte's gesture meant to them. Charlotte, attending her regular lessons that morning, remained unaware of the growing media attention until her mother sat down with her during lunch to explain that people outside the castle had heard about her kindness to Guard Mitchell and were inspired by her example. The princess was initially surprised and slightly overwhelmed to learn that her private gesture had become public knowledge. However, her parents helped her understand that sometimes acts of kindness naturally inspire others and that her example might encourage people to show similar care for those around them. The story gained momentum throughout the day as news outlets picked up the original article, and social media users shared their reactions. Comments poured in from teachers, parents, military families, and ordinary citizens who were touched by the simplicity and authenticity of Charlotte's gesture. Guard Mitchell, who had been prepared for some media attention, was amazed by the positive response from the public. He received messages from fellow veterans, other security professionals, and parents who thanked him for his service and praised his dignified response to Charlotte's kindness. The story particularly resonated with military families who understood the challenges of balancing professional duties with personal struggles. Many shared their own experiences of unexpected kindness from civilians who had noticed and appreciated their service. Teachers across the country began using Charlotte's story as an example in classroom discussions about empathy, leadership, and civic responsibility. Students were encouraged to think about ways they could show appreciation for people who serve their communities. From crossing guards to cafeteria, workers to custodial staff, the royal family's social media accounts shared a carefully worded statement expressing gratitude for the positive response to the story while emphasizing that Charlotte's gesture represented values the entire family tried to live by every day. They encouraged others to look for opportunities to show kindness in their own communities. International media began picking up the story, with news outlets in countries around the world reporting on Charlotte's gesture and its impact. The universal appeal of kindness transcended cultural and national boundaries, making the story relevant to audiences far beyond Britain. Child psychologists and education experts were interviewed about the significance of Charlotte's behavior, noting how her actions demonstrated emotional intelligence, empathy, and leadership potential that suggested excellent character development for someone her age. By evening, the hashtag #Charlotte's Kindness was trending on social media platforms, with thousands of people sharing photos and stories of their own acts of kindness, inspired by the princess's example. The movement had taken on a life of its own, spreading far beyond what anyone had anticipated. Charlotte's parents used the dinner conversation that evening to discuss with their daughter the responsibility that came with her position and how her actions could influence others in positive ways. They praised her instincts while helping her understand the broader implications of her behavior. As the family prepared for bed, they reflected on how a simple gesture of kindness had grown into something much larger, a reminder to people everywhere that human connection and compassion could bridge any gap and that small acts of kindness could have far-reaching impacts. The story was no longer just about Princess Charlotte and Guard Mitchell. It had become a catalyst for a broader conversation about the importance of recognizing and appreciating the people who serve others, regardless of their role or position in society. 1 week after the story broke, the impact of Charlotte's gesture had grown far beyond anyone's expectations. Schools across Britain had organized kindness days where students were encouraged to perform acts of service for people in their communities. Coffee shops began offering free drinks to police officers and firefighters. Children started leaving thank you notes for their school custodians and cafeteria workers. Guard Mitchell returned to work to find that his colleagues treated him not as a celebrity, but with a deeper respect that came from seeing how gracefully he had handled an extraordinary situation. The security team had developed a stronger sense of unity and purpose, inspired by the reminder that their service was noticed and valued by the family they protected. Charlotte's parents received hundreds of letters from around the world, with people sharing how their daughter's story had inspired them to be more aware of opportunities to show kindness in their daily lives. Teachers wrote about students who had started bringing extra snacks to share with classmates, while parents described children who had begun helping elderly neighbors with their groceries. The princess herself was initially overwhelmed by the attention but gradually came to understand the positive impact her simple gesture had created. During a family conversation, she expressed amazement that something so small could inspire so many people to be kind to others. Her parents used this as a teaching moment about the responsibility that came with her position and the power of leading by example. Miss Sarah incorporated the experience into Charlotte's lessons, using it as a foundation for discussions about leadership, empathy, and civic responsibility. The princess demonstrated remarkable maturity in processing the experience, showing genuine concern for ensuring that Guard Mitchell and his family were comfortable with the attention they had received. Commander Harrison reported to the royal household that staff morale had reached unprecedented levels following the incident and its aftermath. The story had reminded everyone of why they felt honored to serve the royal family and had reinforced the sense of shared purpose that made the castle community feel like an extended family. Mrs. Davies in the kitchen found herself fielding requests from other royal households wanting to know how they could encourage similar gestures of appreciation from the family members they served. She emphasized that Charlotte's kindness had felt completely natural and unforced, suggesting that authentic care for others was something that couldn't be manufactured, but only nurtured. The story continued to evolve as more details emerged about its ongoing impact. A charity dedicated to supporting military families reported a significant increase in donations, with many contributors specifically mentioning Charlotte's story as their inspiration. Veteran support groups saw increased volunteer participation from civilians who wanted to show appreciation for service members. Guard Mitchell and his wife Sarah were invited to appear on a morning television program to discuss their experience. Thomas spoke eloquently about the honor of serving the royal family and the unexpected joy of receiving such personal recognition from Princess Charlotte. Sarah shared how the princess's kindness had come at a particularly difficult time for their family and had reminded them that they were not alone in their struggles. The television appearance led to additional positive developments for the Mitchell family. A local businessman, moved by their story, offered Thomas a part-time consulting position that would supplement his guard income without conflicting with his royal duties. Medical professionals reached out to offer assistance with his daughter Emma's ongoing health concerns. Charlotte watched portions of the television interview with her parents, feeling both proud and humbled by Guard Mitchell's gracious words about her gesture. She asked thoughtful questions about why her actions had resonated with so many people and what responsibilities she might have to continue inspiring others. Educational institutions began incorporating Charlotte's story into their curricula as an example of authentic leadership and the ripple effects of individual actions. Business schools used it as a case study in the power of genuine appreciation and recognition to transform organizational culture and morale. The international response continued to grow, with similar kindness movements emerging in countries around the world. Social media remained filled with stories of people performing acts of service inspired by Charlotte's example, creating a global community connected by shared values of compassion and gratitude. 6 months later, Charlotte and Guard Mitchell encountered each other again during a routine castle event. Their brief, warm exchange demonstrated that their connection had evolved into a genuine mutual respect that transcended their different roles. Thomas thanked Charlotte once more for her kindness, while she expressed continued gratitude for his dedicated service to her family. The lasting impact of Charlotte's gesture became evident in the sustained changes it had inspired. The castle staff had maintained their elevated sense of purpose and community, continuing to support each other in ways that extended far beyond their professional duties. Guard Mitchell had become an informal mentor to newer security personnel, sharing the lessons about dignity and grace he had learned from his experience with the princess. Charlotte's parents observed with pride how the experience had shaped their daughter's understanding of her role and her potential to influence others positively. She had developed a more sophisticated awareness of how her actions could impact others while maintaining the natural kindness and authenticity that had made her gesture so powerful. In the first place, the story of Princess Charlotte's secret gesture had become more than just a heartwarming news item. It had evolved into a lasting reminder about the power of simple human kindness to create connections, inspire others, and generate positive change that extends far beyond the original act. The 8-year-old princess had unknowingly demonstrated that true leadership comes not from position or privilege, but from the courage to reach out to others with genuine care and compassion. Years later, as Charlotte continued to grow into her role as a member of the royal family, people would still reference her gesture to Guard Mitchell as an example of how authentic kindness could bridge any gap and remind everyone of their shared humanity. The secret she had shared with one dedicated guard had become a public treasure, inspiring countless acts of kindness and reinforcing the timeless truth that the smallest gestures often carry the greatest power to change the world.